They say music feeds the soul and food feeds the heart. So please join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man, where we sit down with Black men from across the world who talk about their experiences with mental health, mental wellness, and how they are taking on their own mental health journey. We sit down over brunch to break it down. Make sure you join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man. Hello and welcome to another edition of Brunch with the Black Man. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, and we are here with Ed Gainey. Hello, Ed. How are you doing?
I'm good, Miracle. Happy holidays. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, it's always good to have a sit-down conversation. I know you're super busy.
That's all good.
But we're here at Brunch with the Black Man. We get to eat some food.
Yeah, I'm waiting on that. Looking good.
looking good. But how have you been?
I'm good. I can't complain. I mean, day by day, everything's good.
So we'll get into some stuff. We're talking about day by day. Where did you grew up in Homewood, right?
No, I grew up, my family's from the Hill, but I was born on a street called Lawn Street in South Oakland.
Okay.
And then I was there for about 7 years, and we moved to East Lib in a building called, my grandma moved there first, and I moved in with my grandma, and it was at the high-rise building in East Liberty. It's gone now, and I moved to the low-rises. I went to school in Homewood, so a lot of my time was spent between East Liberty, Garfield, and Homewood, and Wilkesboro, and these hills.
So you moving around the east, east side. What was that like growing up?
I mean, it was beautiful. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my childhood. I had a lot of fun in my childhood. Being in multiple communities, you get to meet a lot of different people, and I will always make my childhood more joyful. For me to be it was more joyful, just for the simple fact that every time that thank you, just meeting people from multiple areas and being able to have conversations and play, that was always good to me.
So you say meeting people from multiple areas. Yeah. As you're growing up, moving around, who's being like, look, let me tell you, there's some new music coming out. You got some hip hop. You got some who is that person in your life?
See, I loved Run DMC when they first came out, and LL was big. Then we moved from LL, the Tribe Called Quest was next for me. KRS-One was big back then for me. And that's when the West Coast started coming in with NWA. They was big to me. From NWA, it really moved into Pac. Pac was my favorite rapper. Biggie was great. Harlem was great. Jay-Z, and they all took over. But Pac struggled with multiple different issues, just made him my favorite.
Who introduced you to Pac?
I can't remember who introduced me to him, but Two Apocalypse was the first. When I heard it, I was like, this is different. It was it had so many different genres on it that it was just a different type of mix altogether. So Pac just became someone that could relate to the inner struggles of inner youth. And he could really, you could see the spiritual battle he had within himself, the way he took up for the community, the way he protected the community. And it was that urban inner city community that he really spoke to. And I could feel that.
You're talking about feeling that inner city community. What was your community like? Because you get to be the privilege of going past the bridges, bouncing around. What was your community like for Lil Ed?
I mean, growing up on Collins Ave, it was single moms. 80% of the moms on my block was single mom. So it was all subsidized housing, but you couldn't tell us we was poor. We really didn't know poor. Really, we just thought that's the way the world was. Omega Park was always something that was interesting and entertaining and could always be looked at to have some type of memory you was going to have at Omega Park. If you lived in East Liberty Gardens, East Liberty, Enright Court, East Liberty Gardens, Enright Court, or Collins Avenue, or Auburn, you were always going to have some interesting memories of Omega Park.
And so you have your community, you're going, and your mom is, under 18 when she had you. So y'all have like a closer bond because, she's as you said, it's another child, like raising a child. Mm-hmm. How are your conversations with her as you're growing up and trying to navigate moving and finding your identity?
Yeah, I think that for me, being able to conversate with my mom never was difficult because I got to watch her go through the trials and tribulations of turning into a teenage mom to a woman, and so when you get to witness that and you get to walk with your mom, you get to have different conversations because, again, you see different things. Plus, you're the first child. Whenever, whoever the first child is going to experience things that no other child will ever experience. The first child is what makes mommy mommy. So when you're that first child, you get the ability to understand and watch exactly what mama's going through that the other kids are not going to have that opportunity to see. So it always opens up questions that you can ask mom why we did this or why this is happening or which way we're going. You can have different direction. But my grandmother was strong too. Like for my first 6 years, I lived with my grandmother. So when my mom was pregnant, when she had me, she was at a home called Rosetta. I think it's called Rosetta because that was a home that when you were young and you pregnant, you went there if you want to give your kid up for adoption. And so the day that they had me, my grandma came up there and said, "Nah, we're not giving him up for adoption." And she just took rank, and that's how I got home. So instead of me being put up for adoption, that's how I got to my grandma's house and my mom's house. So as my mom was in training, my grandma was the matriarch. So when my grandma moved to the high-rise building in East Lynn, that's where I moved. So I moved with my grandmother. And then I got to see the different, that I didn't know what was going on until I got older. And me and my mother started having different conversations where she was ready to be the full-time mom. You always had that friction between grandma and mama, right? So you get to be able to determine who's going to raise Eddie. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't Ed Gainey, then it was Eddie. Who's going to raise Eddie? And so that's when my mom became the mother that she is today. So a lot of my hustler spirit I get from my mother and my uncle because I watched them do it every day from nothing.
So you're watching them kind of hustle, get by, you're going to school. And what is your focus like when you're in school? Is it like, oh, I'm going to college? Or is it I'm going to help my mom? Like, what is like little Eddie thinking about like as he's going to to high school?
Great, I probably didn't have a focus, Miracle, to be honest with you. Those people that know me know that the people that I ran with, they didn't have that level of focus. Like I never understood why school was important. I'm not gonna sit there and pretend like I did, I just didn't. Back then they was just telling us go to school and get an education. But I didn't really understand why it was necessary to get an education. And so I never took school serious until I got to college. Once I got to college, I seen things different. When I got to Norfolk State first, I still wasn't ready for school. I just wasn't. So I left Norfolk State in December, the first semester, with a 1.8 average. So when I was coming home from Norfolk State, my mom met me at the door and she was like, "My firstborn, and you bring me home a failure." You know what I mean? All the work, the time, and effort that you see me struggle to go through to where I am today, you go off to college and you come back with 1.8. But me and my mom had never took vacations, right? Like we had never been on a vacation. So I had never been to a beach. So when I got down Norfolk and I experienced Virginia Beach, like it was just a different party. And it was one I fell in love with. But it also made it that I wanted to go to another HBCU because the love at Norfolk was amazing. Like just going to a HBCU was amazing, and it started helping me to gain an identity of who I was as a black man and why that was important in life. But I just wasn't ready to be a student because no one ever taught me how to be a student. They just said go to school and get an education. They never said go to school to learn how to be a student so you could be something that you're purpose and destined to be in life. So I didn't have that identity in regards to education. The only thing I knew was go to school, and when I went to school, I hung out with people that like to party. Like, that's what they like to do. So I didn't take school serious. Like graduating, I went to Holy Rosary. So after Holy Rosary, I did 2 years at Central. Central was a gift because at least it did start installing into me the ability to study. I still didn't have the identity to know why being in school was so important. I didn't understand that till I got to Morgan State University. And they were more focused on turning individuals that went to that school into students. So you start understanding what it meant to be a student, not just in the classroom, but a student of life. And once you understood the definition of student and why that was important in order for you to reach your destiny and your purpose, then you could fall in love with education because you could fall in love with learning.
And so you're, going, you're exploring the beach for the first time, coming back.
And that was the first time I was down there for Greek Week.
So you were like, wait a minute, this is a whole different world.
It was a baptism.
Like I can party, I can have fun, I can run the streets.
DC, New York, Richmond.
You have the planes, you got the trains, you got friends with cars.
Yeah.
Like you out here. Out here.
When mama ain't here.
Listen, freedom, right?
Oh my God.
And so
8 o'clock class, I said, why'd I do that?
And then you learn at Morgan State, you can pick a later class. You can get classes in the afternoon.
Well, Morgan State, it didn't matter. I was more focused.
Yeah.
I was more focused when I got to Morgan State because, one, I watched my mother grind from the age of 15. I never wanted my mother to feel like she raised a failure. you know, and I had to start taking life seriously. But I think that when she put that, you know, when she made that comment, my mother had never spoke to me like that. And so, you know, that's the first time the light bulb for me went off that, you know, now I get it. And this is what I share with young people. Like you, if God wills, you guaranteed to grow up. I mean, grow old. You just ain't guaranteed to grow up. And if you want to grow up, then you have to begin to walk in the destiny that you want to walk in. Like I became an adult at 21. I didn't become a man until I was 29. And a lot of that happened with the birth of my daughter when I was 26. You know what I mean? I didn't want her to grow up in a household where her father wasn't there or that she didn't have a relationship with her father. You know what I mean? So the first 2 years of my daughter being born was like withdrawal to me because I couldn't go out. I couldn't run down the arts. I couldn't run out to the phase 2. I couldn't run out the name of the game. I couldn't run out to the places that I was used to running out to. You know, so as much as I used to call my mom, like, Mom, you know what I mean? You want to watch your granddaughter this weekend? You know, that was never going to be a reality to me because my mother wasn't going to do it. So those first 2 years, I started watching my life change. The greatest investment I could have made was spending time with my daughter because it strengthened our bond. You understand what I'm saying? Where if I would have still been hanging out, I wouldn't have started to walk into the destiny to get me to where I am today. So my daughter, my first daughter, is called my change of life baby. She changed my life. She helped me to grow up. See, my father was 17. He wasn't ready to be a dad. Me and my father cool now. We real cool. We tight. But when I'm saying growing up, he just wasn't prepared to be there. I get it. You know what I mean? So I don't hold no grudge because I'm old enough to understand that in all relationships, they don't end the way that the happy story is supposed to end. I don't know traditional families. I just know families that make it through.
You're talking about, you know, making it through. You have your little one. You're in Pittsburgh. Stuff is like changing. What motivates you to run for office the first time?
When I was at Morgan State University, I had never met a politician in the city. Like I had never had a politician knock on my door. I ain't had no politician come to my school. I never met a politician. They didn't have community meetings. When I first, January of 90, when I got to Morgan State University, the first day of class, I went to class and the professor asked me what I was doing there. And I was like, you teaching, right? You know what I mean? She was like, no, your lesson is out there with your classmates to save the school because they're trying to defund an historical HBCU called Morgan State University. And I ain't know nothing about protesting. We weren't protesting in the city back then. So I went out with my classmates and we marched down to City Hall. And the first mayor I got to ever, the first elected official, politician, whatever you want to call, that I ever got to meet was an African-American mayor from afar called Kurt Smoke. So Mayor Kurt Smoke was the first elected official that I ever met who happened to be a black mayor, you know? So he's the one that I watched. And then you had Kwasi Mfume down there. And you had others that helped us fight up in Annapolis to make sure that they didn't fund Morgan State University. And to me, that was powerful to see the unity, the solidarity of people from this university coming together, fighting government to make sure that they didn't defund this historical black college. Like I had never seen that. I had never seen that movement in my life. You know what I mean? Growing up where I grew up, that's not what we seen. That's just not what we were at. So to be able to see that at my first year at Morgan State University, the first month, first day, it changed the way I seen things. I wanted to get into community development. But again, that was the birth of me learning how to become a student. So what enticed me about politics was the ability to see how power impacted people's lives and made a historical black college still survive and enrich the lives of those that went there.
When you talk about being in community, you were in the East. You were in Homewood. You stayed in Homewood, right?
East Lab, Homewood,
what made you stay? Because, you know, a lot of times people feel like once they learn, the light bulb goes off, they got to get out.
Yeah.
But you were like,
where was I going to go?
You go to Maryland, you could have been Detroit.
I didn't know nothing else. You know I didn't know nothing else. All I knew was Pittsburgh. All I knew was the East Side. So I didn't know anything else. So it's hard for me to say that and Baltimore was beautiful. Baltimore baptized me and made me a student. You know, Baltimore was beautiful. It's the first time I seen real legitimate black business. In my neighborhood, we didn't have legitimate black business. We had business, but it wasn't legitimate black business. You know, I mean, that's just a reality. So, you know, going to Baltimore, it taught me a lot. I mean, it opened my eyes to all that you could be in life. So coming back here, I wanted to help improve the overall quality of life of my community. So when I first got back, there was a a community development corporation called East Liberty Development, but it was closed. It was closed due to the racial tension in East Liberty. A gentleman named Wheeler Winstead was about to open it back up. And I went to him and I said, look, I know y'all don't have no money right now. I'm willing to work for free if you teach me community development. But if you like what I do, pay me. Because I knew a lot of people in East Lab, so I knew that, building these relationships, if I learn how to do it the right way, I can improve people's lives. So I worked hard, and I went back and I studied the history of East Liberty. And then from there, I ended up going to work for a state representative as a legislative assistant that expanded my footprint back in the home where I went to school at, and in the Wilkersburg where my family lived, and in East Hills where I played at. So now I get an opportunity to expand my footprint by helping many people. At that moment in time, that's when I started really getting into politics, when I became a legislative assistant. And from there, that's where, the whole birth of me wanting to run for office happened.
So you are in the community, you're making changes, you're showing up, you have, your little baby, and then, years pass, you fall in love, you get married,
Now, what's funny about that, my wife I lived on Collins Ave. She lived in East Liberty Gardens. That's less than 5 minutes from each other. I knew both of her brothers, but I didn't know her. My mom worked for a gentleman by the name of Harvey Adams, who was president of the NAACP, which was her godfather. And so we were always in close proximity, not only by distance, but relationship. And we never met until we later in life.
So what was that moment like when you realized?
When I met her?
Yeah.
Like the first time I met her?
Yeah. That you feel comfortable talking about.
Nah, I mean, it's all good. Like, I met her at Arts. You know what I mean? So we was at Arts, and she asked me if I was somebody. I said, nah, I'm not him. But I knew what she did. And I said, so what do you do? She's like, well, we're with the Urban League Young Professionals. And, I said, oh, the Urban League Young Professionals. Oh, the boulets, huh? And she was like, no, we help people get jobs and all that. Now I was working for a mayor. I was working for one of the mayors, either Murphy or Lou. It was Murphy. And she asked me what I did. And I said, I'm unemployed. You know what I'm saying? I'm unemployed. I ain't got no job. You know what I mean? I just wanted to see how she was going to respond to that. So we got to talking, and she told me she helped people with rental assistance. So I said, well, give me your card. So one time I was dealing with a constituent, and I was working for Mayor Murphy, and he needed help paying his rent. So I said, all right, this is an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity. Let me see if she can deliver. Let me see what she can do. So I called her, and I was like, this is Ed Gainey. I met you down Arts. She said, yeah, I remember you. She said, you calling me from the mayor's office? She said, what are you doing in the mayor's office? I said, all right, man, let me come forward. I do work for the mayor. You know what I'm saying? I just ain't want to tell you I work for the mayor. But I do work for the mayor, but I got a constituent that needs help paying their rent. This person is about to get evicted. I want to know if you could help him. And she said, give me the name. And she helped him get the money to pay his rent. And so I said, okay. So then one time I seen her at that later on, Urban League Sunday church function. And then that's when we first went out.
See, that's what happens. Go out to Arts, go be a local, like in the community, and you find a love of your life. But as you're doing that, like you're navigating and like you're building and you're getting like the stress of life. When was like the first time you were like, you know what, I need to think about like my mental health and making sure that like I'm okay as I'm out here navigating the world?
Yeah, like when I recognized that I suffer from anxiety. Like when I recognized that, I had problems performing in front of large crowds. And I could never understand why my heart would race and my hands would get sweaty. I could never understand why I couldn't stand up in large crowds. And I couldn't understand that in certain situations that was happening around me and on my block, why, I would get this weird feeling, you know what I mean? Or I would wake up shaking, like I didn't know that I suffered from anxiety until I was diagnosed with suffering from anxiety. But I'm not one that likes to take medicine. So I chose not to take medicine and learn how to deal with breathing techniques. So even now, before I speak, like even now, you see me in the corner, I'm just sitting there, I'm getting my mind right. I'm breathing without you knowing I'm breathing. Like I'm breathing now, you not knowing I'm breathing. My palms still get sweaty. But now if I don't have that, I don't feel like I'm ready. So I went from not being able to perform in front of people and crowds to being able to do it comfortably, because I realized that there's nothing I can do to stop the anxiety attacks that I'm gonna have, but breathe my way through it, stay focused, and allow that to be the reason why I go get it.
Talk about breathing and going and getting it. You've been for years moving, shaking, and you still remained in Homewood, right?
Lincoln Lemington, but it's all the same.
Same, sorry, on the east. What has kept you there? Because again, you were state rep, you became the first mayor, you didn't move. And a lot of people
But I did move. I didn't move out of the neighborhood.
Correct. You didn't move
I didn't move physically, but
yeah.
You gotta remember my family's from the Hill. I knew people on the north side. Like I knew people from all over. And the greatest gift that I got is that when I worked for Ravenstar, there was a council person that didn't want me out east politicking at all. So I had to build different constituencies all throughout the city. So whether it was in Bells, Hoover, Allentown, Knoxville, Arlington, Manchester, Brighton Heights, wherever it was, because I didn't really need to be in the East anyway, because I'm born and raised out east. I know the East. I'm still gonna go to the East meetings when I ain't gotta be at work. So you can't really prevent me from being out east. But look what you gave me the opportunity to build citywide. You got me to be able to serve people citywide and build strong relationships and begin to meet people on multiple different levels. You helped me to grow up. So the pain that you thought you was putting on me was really the pain, or what they say that steel sharpens steel, it sharpened me. It made me have relationships all over. And it made people believe that when I said I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it, because if I say I'm gonna deliver, I'm gonna deliver.
Talk about, people not wanting you in certain spaces. How have you been able to just keep belief in yourself, right? Because I think a lot of times people think it's easy to be the first. And it's not. No. So you deal with a lot of fights and pushback, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately. But how do you keep yourself going and staying motivated and making sure that you're okay?
Because I think you got to know when you're hurt. I don't think that is for me. I'm okay with admitting that there are things that sometimes people say that hurt you, right? There are things that when you are attacked every single day that bother you, particularly when they're not true. So you have to first be able to admit when you're hurt. You don't need to run away from being hurt. And you also got to know that when you're scared. A lot of times people don't like to admit when they're scared, but I don't. I can tell myself, I can look in the mirror and say, I'm scared of this. I'm scared of dealing with this. I really don't want to do it. I'm scared. I don't have no problem admitting to myself when I'm scared. What I don't do is allow me being scared to turn into fear. I don't allow it to turn into fear, because then that way I'm paralyzed now. I don't want to do it because I'm scared of what could occur, right? I don't never want to give in to fear. I always got to understand that me being scared is the obstacle to the way I need to go in order to demonstrate faith. So if you ever walk into a room and you don't have no fear, maybe you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be there. Because in order for you to be able to do anything or serve people, you got to be a student of the situation. And as long as I know that I'm a student of the situation, as long as I know I've studied, as long as I know I'm ready, as long as I know I'm mentally prepared, then I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to put on the best all that I can put on. And at the end of the day, whatever happens, happens. But me being scared didn't remain. I bowed down to fear. I demonstrated my faith by going through it. There's nothing wrong with being scared. I tell people that all the time. For real, for real. You know what I mean? You just got to know the difference between being scared and having fear. And the one thing I don't have is fear.
You talk about going through it. You've had to publicly navigate some going, through. You had tragically what happened with your sister, and you had to navigate that and have that conversation publicly. How has that been for you? Because I think a lot of times people get to grieve, but when you have to grieve in public, you don't always have the ability to be as vulnerable as you would like.
Yeah, I had, so it was twofold for me, right? The night my father called me, he lives in Virginia. And he said, something happened to your sister. I need you to go down there and check it out. By the time I got down there, my other brother and my sister was sitting in the corner crying. And I looked over towards the bar, and they were putting her in a body bag. And it was the first time that I had seen anybody in my life get put in a body bag. And so those images don't leave. Like, those images are images that stay with you. But it's also a time that, another reason that I fell in love with my father. Like, I watched my father navigate that. I watched my father take in all 3 of her kids. And they were all under the age of 8. And I watched them raise all of them to where all of them were productive citizens. I watched him deal with the nightmares. I watched them get them counseling. And I know how those situations can really turn out. And because of my father, they didn't turn out that way. And so I'm glad I got a relationship with my father, because he couldn't be the daddy that I may have needed him to be when he was 17. But he's the father that those kids needed right then and there in order to get through the trauma of losing a mother. So when I say my father's my hero, I watched him walk through some things that bury others. And there ain't no greater love than that.
Talk about father, parents, your father, and your grandfather. Yeah. You know, you got little ones. What is that bond like? Because I know you said you used to families going through it and getting it done, but you kind of created almost like this family, and it's very much a nuclear family. You support each other. You're at each other's events. Everybody's doing like different things. Do you sit and think about like what you have created and what you have built with your family?
No. I don't ever sit back and think. I don't have the time. I gotta do for my family because I want them to understand that I love them. And that in this love, you're gonna see my vulnerability and you're gonna see my strength. In this love, I have to be a daddy that helps to bring you through some things that you're gonna have to navigate in life. Because I love you, there's gonna have to be some times that I'm gonna have to be tough. Because I love you, you have to understand I'm not your friend, I'm your daddy. And I always want you to have experiences that I didn't have because I want you to understand that life is full. Like I used to tell them, I watched my mom hustle many a day. My mom and my uncle poured all the hustling into me. And I multiplied that hustle. That's the only way I could tell them thank you. When it's all said and done, whether I'm here or not here, I want you to always believe that you got what it takes to succeed in life. And so I haven't always had the time to reflect, but I've had the time to love them in the moment. And I think a lot of times when we lose out is that we don't love our family in the moment. Like we always running around, we always doing X, Y, and Z, but we don't take that moment to demonstrate the love that we have for our family. And I think that's critical. You know what I mean? And so even in my career, I start getting up earlier now as we talk about mental health. Because it's a heck of a question you ask. Like I get up a half an hour earlier than anybody in my family every day. So that I can have that half hour just to be silent. Just to be silent, just me and my thoughts. Just so that I can tell my mind, you don't know nothing today. Don't go into this day thinking you know anything. You don't know nothing about today. Because the teacher today didn't come to teach me anything. But I'm gonna learn a whole lot today so the next day when I come back with just me and my thoughts, I can think about what I learned that yesterday, recognizing that today I don't know nothing. I don't know anything. The teacher didn't come to teach me today yet. So it's important to me that, one, I'm always in the moment, because in the moment is what keeps me sharp. In the moment is what helps me go through battling rams of them attacking me every single day, to remember the love that I have and that the love that people have for me, so that I'm not lost about where I am in society, and to remember where I come from. I'm in the city that I'm the mayor, where it's 23% African American, a single mama at 15, and most of us don't even make it this far, who's had to go through the trials and tribulations of young black males in urban areas, and still, because of the love of a mother and an uncle and a grandmother, made it out to become the first black mayor. I don't take that for granted. So it's not that I don't like to take a moment to reflect. I just love to live in the moment.
Living in the moment, what has been to you some of the great benchmarks that you have been able to achieve in your career?
Wow. How you asking me? I mean, becoming mayor was big. Becoming the first black mayor of a city I love is big. To be able to navigate some of the racial issues in this city is big. To becoming a state representative was big. To being the first in my family to graduate from college was big. And just the symbolic messages that, like, some things, like I remember when I graduated in 94, right? They said, Ed, your commencement speaker is from Pittsburgh. And I was like, oh yeah, that's beautiful. Who is it? And they was like, August Wilson. I was like, he ain't from Pittsburgh. I don't know him. They don't know. So I started calling my people from the Hill and all that, like, yo, no, August Wilson. They was like, nah, what is you talking about? And so nobody I grew up with knew him. So I called my mom. My mom was like, yeah, he's a playwright and one of the best to come out the Hill. But we didn't study that when I was growing up. They didn't teach that in our schools. Wasn't in no history books. That's not what they talked about on my block. So I didn't know it. And it was wild because he gave the commencement speech at Morgan State University the day I graduated, but also made Radio God for talking about this city having the first black mayor. For the one that gave my commencement speech to the one who received the speech to become the first black mayor. The symbolicness of some things is heavy to me. So having my daughter, my first daughter is heavy to me. Because I never thought I could be a father. I love to run too much. But all I did was take the same hustle I had in the streets and put it into politics. Every day serve the people. Every day make it happen. Every day see change. If people on my block can get up and do it for nothing, and I got an opportunity to do it for something, how much harder will I go?
That is a word. That is a word. Well, thank you so much for sitting down here, for joining us. And that has been this week's episode of Brunch with a Black Man. Thank you so much for tuning in.
One love, one hood.